Welcome to the Traveler's Blueprint. Start designing your next adventure.
Welcome, TTB community. I am Bob DeMena, and here with me, as always, is the incredibly orchestrated Elliot Shibley.
Orchestrated, like I'm organized? Or I am directed.
You're methodical. You are, yes, organized. You are, you're a planner. I guess that's, you are, though. You are a planner. You're not a planner like me, especially when it comes to travel. But
you're right.
I think orchestrated is a good adjective for you, just broadly speaking.
All right, thank you. So before we get into the episode, this is our travel bite. So I will list off the articles that we have going on. We've got 13 fun articles. We're going to end with some fun ones. But first, since we're still in the middle of a pandemic, we're still going to talk about the COVID-19 virus. Travel to Europe could pick up significantly by summer. On the flip side, there are discussions where there are no end in sight, and any restrictions may not be lifted for a while. That is still up for debate, though. And Delta, we'll talk about them, what they did with a few of their seats. We talk about bipartisan. Wow, that's easy to say. Bipartisan.
Try it again.
One more time. Bipartisan Hospitality and Commerce bill gains support of travel industry. So good stuff happening for travel. And then we talk about the race to create a global digited COVID-19 passport, which we've talked about many times. This article goes into a little bit of detail on it. And then how airline CEOs are trying to reduce their carbon footprint. We talk about the CDC and the latest COVID-19 test requirements before domestic travel. We'll go into reimagining travel in a post-COVID-19 world, which we talked about in one of our travel or roundtable discussions. But since we have a better picture, we have more information. We'll see what that looks like. And we're going to talk about some fewer, smaller articles, like if you're planning to go camping this summer, you may want to plan now and reserve your spot now. There was a little bit of a plane incident over Denver, and we're going to talk about extractive tourism. Yes, we didn't know what that meant either, but we will talk about it later. And then since it is Black History Month, we'll talk about a few memorials, landmarks, historic places that had a significant impact, and they had a great, what am I trying to say here, Bob? They had impact, significance during the transatlantic slavery for 400 years. Yes. And then the last two articles are fun ones. We talk about electric planes again, and then the recent mission to Mars. All right.
Yeah. I'm pumped for them.
So that's all of them. So we'll get into all of those later.
Yeah. But before we do that, if you find this podcast entertaining, please consider giving us a 5-star review. That is probably the biggest compliment you could give us, and it goes a really long way in ensuring that we get really good guests for the podcast. If you love us, then just subscribe. Subscribe and like and comment, or do whatever that it is that you find enjoyable on social media in regards to the podcast. We really love it, and we would be happy to engage with you on that platform, whatever platform you choose. So now we're going to get into, as we roll into March, we're going to get into this new segment, and we're going to do it across every single podcast episode. We're going to introduce a travel tip of the week. So each week, I'm going to very quickly break down a single travel tip in just 1 to 2 sentences. Keep in mind, if you ever have any questions on any of these travel tips, we encourage you to send us an email via thetravelersblueprint@gmail.com, and I could just follow up with you on additional information for that tip. So this week's travel tip of the week is related to Google Flight Insights. So Google Flight Insights has a price graph that shows you general pricing for flights several months out. You can use this tool to easily review price trends for your destination and get an idea of when flight prices may dip. With that information, you can try to book your trip during that time frame.
It's really helpful. I've used that quite a bit.
I use it all the time. So
not lately though.
No, I still look at flights. Why
do you torture yourself?
I find it actually quite enjoyable. But in addition to that, we do offer travel consulting services here at the Traveler's Blueprint. We offer 20% off of flights. So if you don't want to use the Google trip, or if you do and still want additional help, we do help people get cheaper airfare, up to 20% off. Just go to our website and you can navigate to that. We also have the Traveler's Blueprint video tutorials. It's a 5-part video tutorial program. It brings you through the navigation of cities, booking airfare, restaurant and blog research, the general itinerary layout, safety, local safety and local travel. I'm sorry, safety and local norms at your
Man, we're
destination.
struggling this morning.
Yeah, and general thoughtful travel. We have it on sale right now for $25. Again, it's 5 parts, and this could be incredibly beneficial for trying to learn and understand a new city within the United States. It does not have to be used for foreign destinations. It still is applicable and can work in the United States of America. So thank you if you're even considering purchasing that video tutorial program. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to Keshler of Lake Nard Tourism. He is our Philly guide. He's an incredible guy. He provided a lot of articles for the episode that you're going to listen to today. We're constantly in communication with him. And if you are planning on coming to Philadelphia or even just had any questions about international travel, he's a guy that is filled with a ton of travel knowledge, and he's incredibly up to date on COVID and travel restrictions. So reach out to him. He's at Lake Nard Tourism on most social media platforms. He's often commenting on our posts. You can find him that way, but keep him in mind and definitely book with him if you do plan on coming to Philadelphia.
Yep. So this month we have Jeanette Seha, who talks about cultural inclusivity within the travel industry and within the world in general. We have Charlie Hammerton, who maybe some of you have recognized his name on overcoming homelessness and mental health awareness through travel with his pet ferret, Bandit. And then our last episode of the month with Caroline Meili, she is an experience strategist on how to have the perfect travel experience. And then the last episode of the month is one of our traveler roundtables. So the first article we have this month is traveling to Europe could be up significantly by summer. And on the flip side, we may not see any restrictions lifted. So these are two interesting and opposing articles that came out this month, which I think just goes to show that we don't know anything.
We don't know. I'm going to try to lean on the optimistic article and hope that that's the one that actually comes to fruition. And essentially, a lot of that article was quoting the World Travel Tourism Council, indicating that it could pick up. Again, who knows? We don't know. With all the different news on the variants, issues with vaccine rollout, we really have no idea. So don't get your hopes up too much. But I, again, just want to be optimistic. And
I think it's okay to hope, just be realistic.
Agreed. So, I mean, the travel industry around the world globally suffered a lot, and they're anticipating a V-shaped recovery. I personally think it will happen.
What does that even mean?
On like a graph. So on like a line graph. So instead of it trending up slowly over time and going up and down, it's a V. So it declines.
Oh, so we're at the bottom.
And then we're at the bottom. And we're at the bottom of the V. And then there's going to be a dramatic or significant increase. And so it's called like a V-shaped recovery. I'm familiar with that now because of like COVID. And I've never looked at this many line graphs in my life.
Yeah, right.
Ever since over the past year. But
so is that like the 2008 financial crisis? Like the boom, boom?
They said in the article, that they did have a V-shaped recovery with the travel and tourism sector after the 2008 financial crisis. And they're anticipating one again. I think that they're correct only because just being in the travel industry ourselves, everybody's just so anxious to hit the road again. The second the doors open, I think people are going to run through them. It's going to be like Walmart in Tennessee on Black Friday.
I think that's very accurate, but I don't think countries are going to open up as fast as we think they are. I think Europe specifically is going to struggle to open up its borders because of the unreliability and inability to check passports between country to country travel, because a lot of Europeans travel by train or bus and not by flight. So they're not going to be able to check to see if you have had the COVID-19 vaccine. There's
an article we're going to get to, and that's obviously they're already accounting for that, and they're trying to figure that out. There's an article we're going to get to that actually discusses that specifically. The only thing I'm going to add to this article before we move on is that I see travel opening up soon for Western nations, the ones that have the ability to distribute the vaccine across their population, the ones that are actually that have the money to do this, and they're going to be the ones that America is going to be one of the first nations to travel to Europe. I think if you're living in a country that doesn't have the funds and the structure to get the vaccine rolled out across the nation, you may have to wait a little bit longer. You might not be able to get into Europe or the United States as quickly as the Americans are going to be able to travel to Europe. So we'll just have to see and let it play out.
Yep. So Delta, we talked about them in the beginning. They're blocking middle seats through April as their other competitors basically fill the entire plane. Bob, I know you're a skeptic on this.
Yeah, it sounds great in theory. And honestly, I love not having someone sitting next to me, especially a stranger during a pandemic. It sounds perfect. But in order to get to that seat on that plane, you need to you might drive yourself, but typically you Uber or you take a train, you get to the airport. So there's public transportation there. You have to walk into the airport. You need to sit in line. You need to go through security. You need to put your bags on belts that other people put their bags on. You need to wait in line again. You maybe sit in line to get a coffee. You're sharing this air. You get on the plane. Now you're sitting next to people. You have someone across the aisle from you. Is it really doing anything else? Like, is there an additional layer of protection by removing the middle seat, or is it just for show?
So I'm personally, I think this is better regardless. Yeah, you have to go through all that stuff, but in most of those situations, you're in minimal contact for a shorter period of time, right? Okay. On a flight. Yeah. Going to California, you could be on the plane for 6 hours. And if you're sitting next to someone, that is 27 inches away from your face as opposed to 54 inches, that's a big difference.
Great point. Okay. Yeah, good point.
And I think that's all there is there. I'm curious to see. I don't know the actual science behind it to see if it actually makes an impact.
Right. That's sort of my point. Yes, you're not closer. You're not actually rubbing shoulders with somebody for 6 hours on an airplane. But if you're on an airplane with somebody for 6 hours and they're 27 inches away, is there anything that says that it's not as likely to be transmitted at that point with that duration of time? I don't know. So anyway, let's move on.
All right, so I'm going to let you talk about this one because I struggled pronouncing it earlier.
So the Bipartisan Hospitality and Commerce Bill gains the support of the travel industry. Essentially, the U.S. Travel Association has come out in support of this new bill, this new act presented to Congress in February. This is largely due to travel saw a significant decline of about $500 billion in spending last year, while almost 4 in 10 U.S. jobs lost in 2020 were within the leisure and hospitality sector. So the bill is going to include a temporary business tax credit to revitalize business meetings, conferences, and other structured events, a temporarily restored entertainment business expense deduction to help entertainment venues and performing arts centers recover, an individual tax credit to stimulate non-business travel, and then tax relief for restaurants and food and beverage companies to help restore food service jobs and strengthen the entire American food supply chain. So essentially what I got from this article is that the U.S. travel sector the U.S. Economy will not be able to travel without the recovery of the travel industry. And so did that make sense? I feel like I just... Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the U.S. economy will not be able to recover without recovering the travel industry.
Yeah.
And this is essentially just ways to help that happen quicker.
Yep. And I think I saw a statistic that 1 in 10 jobs in the United States is related to the travel or hospitality sector in some shape or form.
4 in 10.
No, 1 in 10 are all jobs in the United States. 4 in 10 are what were lost.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you have to think about restaurants in historic centers close to landmarks. Yes, they're restaurants and they get locals, but you have to consider the tourism that flows into those restaurants too. And when you don't have people coming to the Liberty Bell, the restaurant in Old City might not definitely will not be getting the business they need, even if you have the locals still coming there. And for those of you who don't know, that was all Philadelphia. The Liberty Bell.
I mean, I live right next to Hershey Park, and Hershey Park is literally for tourists.
Yeah,
and
right.
A lot of people that live in the area also go there, but it is still like there are tourism dollars that are completely lost that support the downtown Hershey area.
Big time. There's a big overlap.
All right, so now we're going to get into the global digital COVID-19 passport.
So this is what I was referring to early on when you were saying that, there still wasn't a way for them to track and make sure that there was going
No. What they're saying, when you travel via train in Europe, there are no passports required if you're traveling as a European Union citizen. So if there's a digital COVID-19 passport, it won't matter because there's no one to check it.
Right. I think I actually, this might not be the article. It might be coming up in a few minutes, but here, let's just go through this one. So, okay, so the CD, hold on, I lost my place here. So they're not recommending they're not recommending a COVID-19 test for domestic travel. I'm sorry. No, I skipped ahead. I scrolled too far on my computer here. So go on.
So this one is basically what we've talked about for almost a year now, is that people will have this digital vaccine passport for primarily international travel, right? Like if you're going to another country, when you arrive at that destination, you will be checked like you would at any other customs with your passport, but you will also be checked to make sure that you have had the COVID-19 vaccine or vaccines.
Yeah.
But this doesn't really do much for domestic travel unless they start making that a requirement when you check IDs.
Well, that's the whole purpose of this, really, is so the challenges that they're facing is creating something universally recognized across, internationally recognized and safely encrypted, and it's essentially going to have your passport information on there. One of the biggest countries leaning this cause is Greece. So they're one of the biggest advocates for it because 1/5 of their GDP relies on tourism.
Yep.
And if you've flown in the past year into the United States, and I don't know if this is only if you were a non-citizen, but they were requiring people to use the app Verify, which made the process of verifying you met the COVID-19 testing requirements a lot easier. So you would already program your information into this app. They were able to verify it through the app. And so I think maybe if you have an app like this, if you have a system like this in place, you can have people walk the trains, and instead of punching your ticket, they also check whatever. There's so many variables to this. Like if you have an elderly couple who's doesn't have the capability or wherewithal to do it. Like I don't know.
I think some people can't. I think some nations can't agree on how to implement it, which is why that article that we discussed in the very beginning. There may be no end in sight, because if there's no consensus on how to track COVID-19 vaccinations when you travel, then the restrictions won't be lifted.
I don't see how they let that slip through the cracks. There's too much money involved. I don't know. They have to come to a consensus on this, or else travel's going to suffer another summer. And that's really what everybody's looking at. I shouldn't say no one cares, but no one's really thinking about travel right now to Europe. But once May hits, there's going to be a ton of pressure on government agencies and different organizations, tech companies. Like they are trying to make sure we have as close to a normal tourism summer as we ever have had. And I don't know, I'm hopeful, but
as I said earlier, I'm hopeful, but I'm trying to be realistic because we're not going to have full vaccine rollout in the United States until the fall.
Yeah, I saw September is when we should be at a level where it's like safe. We've reached.
Right. So I don't anticipate anything happening in the summer for travel. I expect this to be a very similar summer to last year.
That's depressing. Let's move on. So the CDC is not recommending.
Hey, what you should prepare for is a marathon, and if it ends up only being a 10K, great.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's just so sad. I don't know, and we don't know. Hopefully that's not true. Hopefully that's not true, man. All right, moving on. So the CDC is not recommending a COVID-19 test.
Wait, you skipped one.
Did I? Man,
again, man.
Yeah, I really want to read that article, I guess. All right, so the airline CEOs are set for a White House meeting, or actually did in February. So they're essentially trying to figure out how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Yep.
According to the Air Transport Action Group, air travel contributes to about 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is expected to actually rise over the next several decades as travel becomes more readily available to the middle class.
Really, to everyone.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they're looking, we've talked about it before. electric planes. We've talked about hydrogen fuel cell planes. Boeing actually created either Airbus or Boeing created a concept plane that would be hydrogen fuel cell. And I mean, it's for people that are very much into sustainability. Traveling is a conflict of interest because you want to travel and you want to go see things and live sustainably, but travel itself is not sustainable.
Nope, not yet.
Not yet, which is important. All right, now you can get into the CDC.
So, and really, there's not much to this article. At this time, the CDC is not recommending required point of departure testing for domestic travel. That's something that I keep seeing tossed around in travel groups online. Like, people are worried that you're going to be required to do that for traveling, state to state. So according to a CDC statement sent to CNN, as part of our close monitoring of the pandemic, in particular the continued spread of variants, we will continue to review public health options for containing and mitigating spread of COVID-19 in the travel space. But at this time, they do not recommend that people, they don't recommend people travel, but at this time, they're not going to require a test for domestic travel.
And they follow that up by saying if someone must travel, they should get tested with a viral test 1 to 3 days before the trip, which really hasn't changed. And that after travel, you should get tested 3 to 5 days post-travel and stay at home and self-quarantine for the first week, which was reduced from 14 days.
Something to add to this that I read somewhere else is that they're still recommending if you did get the vaccine that you should still get the test because they're still accumulating data on if you can still transmit and carry the virus once vaccinated, even though you won't get sick from it. They're still trying to sort that out. I think there's pretty strong studies in Israel, which they've like nailed the vaccine rollout, that transmission dropped dramatically. And
post-vaccination.
Post-vaccination. So it's promising that maybe soon, hopefully soon. I'm throwing the word hopefully around a lot this episode.
It's all we can do.
Yeah, we won't need to be tested if you're vaccinated, which would be great, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the United States hasn't really been sequencing its testing of each COVID-19 patient, whereas countries in Europe like Denmark have sequenced every single COVID-19 test.
Well, what do you mean by sequence?
As in they check to see if it's a variant or a mutated version of the virus. So that's how Denmark knows exactly how many cases of the variants are roaming around in Denmark. In the United States, we don't really have an idea. We test 0.3%. We sequence 0.3% of our tests.
Interesting.
So some of the variants could be incredibly widespread at this point. And we know that Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines aren't as effective against the variants.
Yeah.
All right. So really short article here. If you are planning to go camping this spring or this summer, which many of you may be, I don't know. I don't really camp that much. Never really done it, but could be nice since you can't travel internationally yet.
To our West Coast listeners.
Yeah. So basically, if you plan on camping, reserve your spots now. Most federal state parks require reservation. So if the worst case scenario, you can't go, you just cancel the reservation. There is literally no harm in reserving it now.
Like, without a doubt. If you listen to this podcast, you know that that's kind of my method for planning travel anyways.
As you had to cancel 2 trips?
Yes, I did. But absolutely, the demand is going to be extremely high, especially for these types of trips where you get to go out into the woods and you're, by nature, doing social distancing. I love how by nature, it's never been so applicable. It's never been so, But, so obviously, plan ahead. Demand is high and supply is low. This next one is crazy. A Delta plane.
Not something you ever want to see when you're on a plane.
And if you're listening to this and you haven't watched the video yet, watch it. So a Delta plane in the United States, the engine burst into flames and all of the pieces are surrounding the engine broke off and landed in people's front lawns, in football fields, in this town in Colorado, in Broomfield, Colorado. The video of the engine on fire with no casing, just like the bare mechanics of the engine with flames visible. Dude, I would have been so scared. Now, I knew. I talked to my wife about this. I knew already that that a plane can fly with one engine, so I would have had that knowledge, and maybe would have been a little bit, I don't know, not as stressed about it. But my wife said she had no idea. She would have thought that they were going to crash and die.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was another Boeing 777, not a 737 MAX, but still. Boeing's been having a rough few years.
Yeah, I've been waiting to get in the green with their stock price so I could sell it. Yeah, I'm kind of in the hole with them for a little bit now.
It is absolutely terrifying. Like, if I saw that on a plane, I would be 100% terrified. I think it's lucky that the wing didn't. Like, if the wing was damaged at all, that would be a different story. But literally no one was injured on the plane. But they were unable to confirm if anybody was injured from the falling debris.
I didn't see. Do they know what happened?
I don't know.
I didn't see. I haven't seen anything that actually pinned it something specifically. But yeah, that plane has had a lot of issues, to say the least, and it's not a joking matter at all, because a lot of people have died due to safety issues with that plane. So
yeah,
like I said, if you haven't seen
that was a different plane.
It was. I thought it was this. What
the
was
777.
Oh, okay. That was the one that Boeing did. Like
the 737 MAX is the one that didn't have the full safety electronic package. You had to purchase that
extra for it, which is just ridiculous. Go.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to talk about extractive tourism. And if you're unfamiliar with the topic, extractive tourism, it is more about when you travel, the idea is that you support the community with your tourism dollars. And extractive tourism is this notion that it may sound like you're supporting, but you're actually hurting the communities more than you're helping them. You're destroying historical areas. You're destroying the natural landscapes that you're visiting and supposedly supporting with your money.
Yeah. You see this all over the world. I feel like Machu Picchu is probably a good example of this.
I think so. Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. They immediately come to mind there.
But like downtown historic centers in Amsterdam, which are basically overrun with tourists now, and they're catering towards tourists. So the historic character is now changing because of tourists. That is extractive tourism.
There's a serious push against that now. They're trying to do dramatic things, essentially eliminate their red light district and revamp themselves as a different type of city. Because when I talk to people about Amsterdam, personally, I go for the architecture and the cultural experience and the cuisine, because I'm more inquisitive and I enjoy traveling that way. But anybody else, like the normal traveler, I don't know if that's the right term, but most travelers, when you say, do you want to go to Amsterdam, they immediately gravitate to doing drugs in the red light district. And it does have that reputation, like broadly speaking. So I kind of get it.
I think that has definitely started to shift over the last 10 years.
For Amsterdam specifically?
Yeah. Because what has become popular is that, not Prague. Maybe Prague. Prague is more of the Amsterdam now than Amsterdam.
That's right. I think my wife and I, if we decide to travel, we're capable. We were talking about just like going to Prague and just staying there for a few weeks, but we'll see.
So this was a really interesting article that the author really talked about wanting to transition away. We have an opportunity now with travel being at such a low point where we can change what it would look like after COVID-19 virus ends, this pandemic ends. And he talks about the coming of the vaccine apartheid, which is basically people with the vaccine can travel, those that don't have it can't. And then he talks about the work hard, play hard mantra of, these capitalistic countries that work, again, really hard, and then they just go do crazy stuff in other countries. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, it's a zero-sum game that needs to end, and we need to transition away from it.
I do believe that we are.
I hope so.
And I don't know if we're living in a little bubble where, because this is what we do and we seek out people and articles and information on sustainable travel, thoughtful travel, mindful travel, that we are living in a false bubble. I don't know, but it needs to trickle to the mainstream traveler. I think still needs to occur.
I think individuals like Amanda Kendall with the Thoughtful Travel podcast, I think her notion and promotion of how to travel is really helpful in transitioning out of that extractive tourism model.
Agreed. Yeah. All right. So it is February, and February is Black History Month, and we found a pretty interesting article from National Geographic that essentially identified landmarks that had a significant impact on Black history, but specifically around the slave trade. I read in National Geographic, it might have been last February, about the slave trade, and it's just so staggering, and it's really hard to wrap your mind around what this was. In the article here, they talk about 12.5 million people, mainly from Central and West Africa, were redistributed across the Americas, Europe, and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's
over a course of like 300 years, from 1525 to 1866.
Yeah. So Black history is American history, right? And I want to see this more ingrained in American education. And there's this like taboo to it. Like the American education system, and I guess I'm kind of going on a tangent here, sort of likes to gloss over it. Like, we acknowledge it was bad, and then it's like, okay, let's move on. I don't know. There's not enough effort put into truly deeply understanding what happened here, and how it impacted the trajectory of our country. Like, it's truly a remarkable thing that happened. I don't know. More attention needs to be put on it.
Yeah. Well, and I think Kessler even talked about that in his episode, where when he takes people on the Underground Railroad portion of his Philadelphia tours, people actually seek his tours out because he talks about the truths with slavery in the United States. And some people seek him out because their kids aren't getting the proper education, or enough of the education that they want. Yeah. Yeah. But some of these are in places like Brazil and Mauritius, or Charleston, South Carolina, if you're in the United States. I think that's the only one in the United States that's listed currently, but there's Cape Coast, Ghana.
There's Virginia.
Oh, Virginia, yeah, Monticello. If you haven't been to Monticello, I think that's one of Jefferson's houses.
Oh, okay. No, I have not been there.
Yep.
No, I've been to Charleston.
Yep. I have not been to Charleston, but I have been to Charlottesville. So yeah, it's an interesting article if you want to check it out.
Yeah, the link will be on our show notes.
Yep. So
this is your specialty.
This is my specialty, and I really like this one. It's electric planes again, and we've talked about this a lot. They're getting more groundwork, more of a foundation. United Airlines literally just ordered 200 VTOLs, so vertical takeoff and landing. And they're typically, most electric planes now are still very small. We're not seeing like the commercial airliners go electric, but like 1 to 20 passenger electric planes are going to be the first ones out there. The first.
So we'll have regional electric planes flying around the country. That's pretty cool. So
it's very
we'll actually
cool.
see this grow within the United States. Then it'll probably spill over to Canada and Mexico. And then, if you had to guess, with the knowledge that you have, when the first flight from JFK to London will occur, when do you think it is? If you had to put a year on it.
For electric plane travel?
For an electric plane to go from JFK to Heathrow.
2040.
Wow. Yeah. That's a while. That's longer than I thought. Okay.
Yeah. I think they have to. They're going to be vetted. It's going to take a while to transition the old planes out. I mean, airline industries, they happen slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
New technologies happen slowly. I mean, the electric car was the first car.
Yeah.
It was a battery electric car was first designed in the late 1800s.
Yeah, if you don't know that story, do a quick Google search after this episode, because that is incredible.
And then the gasoline car dominated and still dominates, and we're still 20 years into the electric car revolution, and it's less than 10% adoption.
Yeah, but I think that we've kind of broke down that barrier, and I'm anticipating electric cars to have, over this next decade, to essentially consume the auto industry. That's what I think. I think so too. I don't have as much information on you, but yeah.
Well, I mean, General Motors, right? They just announced that by 2035, they're going to have a fully electric car lineup.
Yeah, I saw Kia release this really sleek electric SUV that really looked good. So they were going with the crossover, because the crossover is the most common automobile sold, right? And it was a really nice looking, like mid-sized SUV, completely electric. So I'm looking forward to that. I my next car is going to be 100% electric. I plan on that. So
I'm hoping my car, for those of you that don't know, my wife and I both drive Chevy Volts. I have a 2014. She has a 2013. We've loved them. Yeah. And I filled up 5 times last year.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Now, granted, you don't have a very far commute, but yeah,
it's true.
All right, last article. This is taking travel on a different trajectory
to new heights
into orbit. Yes. So the Mars, we landed on Mars, and we landed it again. So there have been dozens of Mars rovers, which I didn't realize until I read a National Geographic article on this. They actually dedicated the issue to it. It's incredibly interesting. They landed this rover inside of a crater at the base of a delta, with the idea being previous delta. We should note that there is no water on Mars right now except for the ice. With the idea being that when this planet was a watery planet, the rivers carried sediment from around the planet to this crater, or I guess regionally to this crater, and the idea is to then start boring into the delta to collect a collection of sediment to then send back to the United States.
And basically analyze to see if there were structures of life.
So this rover is holding some of the samples, but it's also sending some samples back on a tiny little rocket ship. It's not going to get back to the United States until 2038, but there will be samples of Mars soil, coming back to the United States.
When did they send Perseverance up?
I don't know.
When did the mission start, I guess?
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Perseverance, July.
Okay.
So they sent Perseverance in July, and it landed in February. Okay. It's collecting soil samples. In addition to that, there's this mechanism on it called the MOVI, and it's essentially seeing if it can convert the carbon-dense atmosphere of Mars into oxygen, anticipating the arrival of humans, and trying to understand before we get there whether or not we can actually change the atmosphere to be able to breathe there at some point. That's incredible. Yeah, it's drilling, it's trying to change the atmosphere, it's taking photographs. It's really this phenomenal human experiment. It's really cool. Like, I'm in the environmental science field. I do a lot of, I look at soil all the time and compounds in soil. I couldn't imagine sitting in NASA behind a computer screen and analyzing soil all the way on Mars. It's unfortunate.
Pretty wild.
They never get to actually touch the soil or see the soil themselves, which is
really until 2038.
Incredible, until 2038. So these it'll actually be coming back. But Mars is fascinating, and it's a pretty incredible thing. If you haven't read about it, maybe try to dive into it just a little bit. Because
in 30 years, we're going to be rescuing Matt Damon.
Yeah, that's one of the movies that I think Neil deGrasse Tyson said was pretty accurate as far as the science behind it. So that's a great movie.
Yeah. All right. That is it. That is all we have. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support our show, you can leave us a review. You can comment on YouTube. You can comment and talk to us on our Instagram and social media pages. If you want to support us and contribute to us financially, we do have a Patreon, or you could buy one of our t-shirts or any of our merchandise. Our Patreon, you can sign up for as little as $1 a month or up to $10 a month if you absolutely love us and want to support the making of this show through the software and through the subscriptions that we have to keep it running. So that's all we have. Stay safe, stay healthy, and tune in next week.
Bye-bye.